the SMAC meeting to order for May. We have one unexcused absence with Barrett, so we have a motion to accept that. Second. All those in favor? Any opposition? Excellent. We have the minutes from the April meeting. Are there any corrections or additions? May I have a motion then to accept the April minutes? Second. All in favor? Any opposition? Fantastic. We're now to the public comment portion. I think Mr. Martin has comment. He was with us at the April meeting. And so we welcome him. And as we did last time, 3 minutes. And we hear the singing bowl, and that means 3 minutes.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to come back and talk about the potential benefits that we have, I think, in linking the issue of stormwater, which you guys do all the time, and this notion of reinforcing the tree conservation ordinance, which is up for a revising of the language. It's text change case TC2-22. And I just want to start first by thanking all of the Stormwater Management Division for their hard work and congratulate you on your what you contributed to the application for the city's new biophilic cities network status. What that means is that we get to start doing things to do what biophilic city network cities do, which is increase the health of our residents and the natural environment and making stronger connections between the two. And I'll tell you a couple of reasons why I think this is so important. It has to do with the 9 planetary boundaries that regulate safe operating space for life to flourish. Is anybody familiar with the 9 planetary boundaries framework? Just raise your hand. Last time you raised your hand, you said you like to breathe and drink and eat healthy food. Well, try again, because if you watch Netflix, Breaking Boundaries, the science of our planet, you will hear these kind of new ideas about how we can change the way we live and work so that we can actually meet human needs in a way that doesn't bust the budget of the planet's carrying capacity. And by that, I mean, we have 9 sort of general areas that they're systems. We have to start thinking in systems. And that's what I'm going to talk about in the next slide regarding tree conservation and stormwater. But for example, I don't have to get a pointer, but at the top here is fresh water change. And over here is climate change. This might be called biodiversity loss, but they're calling it biosphere integrity. And land system change. That's like tree conservation policy at the city of Raleigh. You guys are in the city of Raleigh, so I just wanted to draw one new term. Last week, the Stockholm Resiliency Center published sort of a new update to the systems. They differentiated between blue and green water. Green water is defined as all the water available to plants. And that includes what's in the trees that we want to conserve and protect. And that's in the soil that the root system is part of, and in the leaves. And so it's evapotranspiration. And so here's my proposal and suggestion that we look at this green water and just take what's available in an average mature tree. We calculate that water volume and we link it to the cost per gallon that the stormwater cost share program is paying for stormwater treatment. And that'll give you the value of the tree in terms of stormwater. And we can do that based on the geometries and some facts of water flows in nature. And then we link it to the big picture, but more importantly, we link it to our local tree conservation ordinance. And I think the next step on that would be just establishing the cost per gallon of stormwater treated that you're already paying for. And maybe we can save it by turning that into the value of a tree that we need to protect because they're already doing the work for us. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Martin. Any questions from commissioners or anyone?
I just would watch the Breaking Boundaries movie because it says it all. There's another one called One Strange Rock, hosted by Will Smith on National Geographic. It says it all in a kind of slightly different way. And I just want to introduce my friend and colleague, Jeff, over here. When he gets a chance to do his public comment, he will give you a concrete example of what happens when we lose mature oak tree and the kind of stormwater problems that he experienced. Thank you so much.
Thank you all for your time today. Tim reached out to me. I'll try to make this brief. I've known Tim for a number of times. I'm a resident of Raleigh. I live in the Five Points area. I've lived in that spot for about 30 years. So I was there before Fran and I'm now there after Fran. As a resident of the city of Oaks and a retired landscape architect, I've done residential design work all over the city. So I've watched some of our canopy decline. Specifically in our neighborhood, I've seen the Budley development, all of that disappear. But my personal story is this. I had an 80-year-old, 80 to 100-year-old willow oak that probably was 6, 8 stories tall, which I had very carefully taken care of for a number of years. It was 12 feet off the back of our house. It was starting to drop some major limbs. Part of the problem was because in the storms that we've had as of late, with the canopy disappearing, it was becoming more and more exposed. And although I tried to take care of it to the best of my ability, Mother Nature was taking its course. And it was also beginning to age out. So it was dropping major limbs on our house. And I did not want to remove it, but I did. What I didn't think about, and I know as a landscape architect, let me go back and say what I know as a landscape architect, the cover of that tree has a huge difference in terms of cooling effect, slowing down overland flow. But what I did not think about was what the root system was doing, and it was up under our house. It was safe, no problem there. But once that tree was removed, and I was reminded by a number of the arborists who told me this, it sucks up tens of thousands of gallons of water regularly. What used to be a dry basement is now wet. Every time it rains, that basement is wet. The floor is wet. We put in a dehumidifier, but I never thought about that. So it has changed the microenvironment in our house and in our basement. But I watch as other trees in the neighborhood begin to decline. And when we really have no resource. I can talk to other people in my neighborhood about what my experience has been and how it impacts the environment. They know the property value in terms of having major tree cover. But what they don't understand is once you remove something like that, what happens not only above board, but below board in terms of the soil. So it's just a personal experience. It's something to keep in mind as we move forward with the tree ordinance, because it isn't just a simple cover, but it's what it does to stabilize the soil beneath and protect for further erosion. And I just wanted to share that all with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? I want to thank both of you for your public comment time. And as I said in April, SMAC does not have an official capacity in this text change. Of course, we received the information that you gave, and thank you. Now on to commission and stormwater staff updates. Mccullum is our commissioner who will give some comments and tell us more about herself.
Thank you. So I've been here, I guess, this is my 4th meeting in total. So 2 in person, 2 virtual. So bridging the gap there. But I grew up in Texas and grew up specifically in Houston and went to undergrad in San Antonio, Trinity University, and studied environmental science and also geosciences there. And led to the geo path at first before coming, moved north, a little bit away from the humidity in North Carolina. To do a water resources management master's degree. And I was lucky enough to find a role in Raleigh and work really on the water planning side. And luckier that my husband decided to also move up from Texas and join me here. So yeah, it's been a good couple of years working, and I think just really drawn to SMAC. I mean, obviously, working in the water sphere all the time and looking for a way to really get involved in the community, finding there's so much that goes on behind the scenes as, you know, the area is changing in the last couple of years that I've lived in Raleigh. And so it's just a great way to work in a field that I'm passionate about and kind of working all the time, but also see that other side of the city. So definitely great for being here and looking at that. So yeah, but that's all for that one.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You have the floor, so you're up next.
Perfect, yeah. There's a formal transition there.
That's right.
Yeah, so I guess also kind of being not only up here, but acting as a liaison with the planning commission, starting that, just trying to get a bearing of what that really looks like and what that means as far as being a, you know, contributing to both ends. And I think for the initial one, I just wanted to present, I suppose, two different ones, you know, I guess monthly or whenever is appropriate, bring up ones that are kind of on the radar, either things that are occurring that they, you know, the planning commission's looking at, items that are important in that context, or maybe they're evaluating rezonings, that type of thing that could actually have some stormwater implications or kind of being flagged on that end. So definitely want to thank Wayne for his help and their help to kind of pull me up to speed and doing some side research to make sure I'm kind of getting to terms on things. So definitely a work in progress, but I wanted to share a few of the things that they're talking about. The very first one is on looking at FEMA. So periodically FEMA updates the 100-year floodplain map, which we're quite aware of. So they're going through a process of updating the maps, and then it kind of goes through this kind of adoption process. So one thing the city council, I believe council, had passed an ordinance to prohibit development on vacant lots. And so that was hopefully going to be based off of those kind of updated boundaries, updated floodplain areas. They're a little bit delayed in coming out, I guess, through the adoption process. And so instead of having it on April 1st, they're kind of extending that to be adopted, that ordinance to be adopted in mid-July, I believe on the 19th. So the hope there is that it'd be kind of aligned with the latest and greatest information on flooding, on the kind of latest and greatest floodplain mapping. So that's one thing. It's a good thing coming down the line, but it is a little bit delayed from what they initially expected. So that's number one on the list. The other one is looking at one of the rezoning cases that was quite interesting and kind of looking through the docket that's upcoming. So one of them, I missed writing down the actual kind of the name of that one, but it's on 517 Buck Jones Road. And that one's interesting because it's in the Walnut Creek watershed. And it is up, the area that will be rezoned is upstream from an area that's kind of already experiencing some of the flooding issues. But primarily it's one specific, you know, one specific property or kind of area, apartment complex that's developed or kind of already been developed in a floodplain zone. They've experienced several floodings throughout, you know, some of the major ones like Fran and other kind of floodings throughout time. So there's noted complaints of flooding that's already gone, that's already occurred here. So they're kind of, the development will be upstream of that. And so it's kind of going through the process of the rezoning. Again, the apartment has already been, it's already in a flood zone, and the city is, I guess, Wayne, please add a little bit more color here. But yeah, it's already it was developed in a floodplain area. And I guess with the approval process, it'll be kind of brought to the planning commission. And I guess they have the options to either approve or reject as is, or the developer, the property owner can offer, kind of voluntarily offer some other stormwater conditions to help control some of that stormwater. So it's a little bit of a unique case where, yes, there's known stormwater issues in that area, but this one is potentially likely not to really have too much of an impact because its development is quite small, and also no matter what, that apartment is already in that kind of floodplain zone that will be likely impacted by future storms. So potentially Wayne can add a little bit more clarity and color there, but those are two ones that are kind of on the docket coming up that are important issues that I wanted to pass along and share.
Thank you.
A question related to that, I think I was on Kevin can weigh in on this or not. I guess my recollection is, if we have a new development come in and it adversely impacts downstream or can exacerbate no downstream flooding, we can't do anything about that anymore because we can't. State requirements don't allow us to impose stormwater requirements more strict than the state standards. But if we have a rezoning that gives us an opportunity to potentially mitigate some past development impacts, like in this situation, if they want to voluntarily provide some stormwater requirements, right?
Correct. It would have to be a voluntary offering of a condition. The city cannot require conditions be offered as contingent on the rezoning. But if the developer was inclined because of neighborhood input to offer those types of conditions voluntarily, they could do that. And that could be a consideration in how the rezoning is received by the planning commission and the city council. And the one unique aspect, so our UDO, Unified Development Ordinance, does allow us to require more stringent flood controls on a piece of property that's being developed if there's documented downstream structural flooding and the area of that land is more than 5% of the contributing drainage to that structural flooding. Okay. In this case, as Mccullum accurately conveyed, the property is very, very small relative to the whole watershed that is causing the flooding. So that would not trigger that requirement for more stringent flood controls in this situation.
Okay, I was wondering how that, our regulations interact with state requirement that we can't require stormwater management for an existing impervious surface. So, and how would we apply our standard more restrictive downstream impact control given that state ordinance?
Yeah, good question. So the way that state ordinance is applied, in this situation, this is a multi-acre parcel that has a single family residence on it. So there is some existing impervious. And then if the rezoning is approved and the development is put in that has multiple townhomes and things too, the way the stormwater controls would have to be installed is they would only control the incremental increase in the impervious area. Okay, they would not have to be designed to control the existing impervious area. It would only be the change, the increase. So that's inconsistent with the state requirements. Now that provision I mentioned before, so that control is for the 2-year storm and the 10-year storm. Or the storm that has a 50% chance of occurring in any given year, and the 10-year storm, which has a 10% chance of occurring in any given year. Those are the two storms that peak flow has to be controlled to pre-development conditions. If there's downstream flooding and it meets that 5% threshold, then they also have to control the 50 and the 100-year storms. So that's what triggers to go above and beyond the stormwater controls where there's documented downstream flooding. I know that's a lot to digest. If anyone has any more questions about that, please let me know. I'll be glad to follow up and give more information. Thank you. Point. Okay, no major staff updates at this point. High priority topics. I had reported last time that we were going through an audit process of our Clean Water Act NPDES, what's called the MS4 permit. That's the municipal separate storm sewer system. So that is a federal Clean Water Act permit that regulates a number of our activities related to post-construction flow controls and illicit discharge provisions, public education, public outreach, and so forth. So we did go through a self-audit process, and it went very well. We submitted that audit. And, we feel very good about our results. I don't want to give away too much because next month in June, we're going to have a presentation on some more specifics of how that turned out and how we graded ourselves, which was generally pretty good. There were a few partial items that we felt we could improve a little bit, but in general, very, very good compliance with the permit. We'll see if the state agrees after they go through it. The next step in that process will be the state will pick one of the program areas and then come and do a more thorough in-person audit. It's the next step of that. But we'll give you more details in June. Moving to notices prior to construction.
We do have several projects that we're anticipating going into construction in the next 90 days. One is the Western Northbridge Stormwater Improvements Project. We received bids on that project last week. And they came in just a hair under $5 million. That would be the largest drainage improvements project that we've done as part of the stormwater program for a single project. But we were pleased with that bid. It's a very competitive bid, especially in this environment where we were wondering if it could have been higher, given all the supply chain issues and so forth. So we were pleased with those bids. They were under the engineer's estimate. And then there's several smaller projects, West Brewery channel repair and Northgate Drive channel repair, some smaller channel stabilization and repairs, and Burgess Court is a repair to a failing head wall where a culvert comes out from under the road. So much smaller project, but all expected to move forward in the next 90 days. Well, that answer any questions that any person.
Okay, thank you, Wayne. I now invite Preston forward. We'll talk about the Great Raleigh Cleanup Organization.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Thank you all for having me. Wayne said I could be informal. It's the only way I know how to be. I just wanted to introduce myself. My name is Preston Ross. I'm the founder and executive director of the Great Raleigh Cleanup. We're a volunteer organization that has a mission of making Raleigh 100% litter free. And it's important to me that people within the city know of us, know who we are, so that we can be a resource to the city. We've been around for about a year and a half. We're almost at 70,000 pounds of trash collected. So Wayne and Joyce have been supportive of our organization, and I want to, in turn, be a resource to stormwater management. So he invited me here today. If you guys have any questions, like I said, if, just for us to get out in front of people so they can know who we are, I think that's helping to increase our impact and build our brand and what we can do for the city. Yes.
Do you guys have general cleanup days? Like,
They are a bit sporadic. We do one a week, at least one a week, either on a Tuesday, Saturday, or Sunday. And at this point, we are a very young organization. We're only a year and a half old. It kind of really just depends on my availability when I'm available to do a cleanup. So they all are posted on meetup.com. Anybody's welcome to come. Once a month, we have specific events where children are encouraged. Those are usually on a greenway, usually have some sort of creek involved. So, but 85% of our cleanups are like roadside, high traffic areas. But once a month, we do hop on a greenway and so forth.
Excuse me, I'm wondering if you noticed more or less, I guess, less litter along improved streetscapes, with, say, newer crosswalk markings. And I'm a big fan of curbing that's being painted like that.
We in our short time, we've noticed that there are less larger items. We like to say that we're moving into a maintenance phase of our organization where we're still pulling out big stuff. We're still having cleanups after 2 hours when we have 3,000 pounds, but we are getting to a place where it's just more surface water bottles, chip bags, cigarette butts, that kind of thing. So, which as much as we try, I think that's going to kind of always be a challenge for us. But I think we do see that we don't have as many, over 1,000 pounds, 2,000 pound cleanups as we used to, which is we'll accept.
Probably just provide a little context. So I met Preston at a citywide cleanup that the city of Raleigh had organized, and he brought his whole crew out to Gordon Street to do a cleanup. And I'd not run across his organization before that, but I just want to say they brought the organization to clean up. They included recycling of cans and, and other high valuable recyclables, which is a nice addition to what we were doing. And I just wanted to keep in touch and recognize Preston for what he's doing because of the co-benefits that come with our program. So looking for future continued opportunities to partner with his organization and other organizations. Litter is a big issue, and it seems like it's really been highlighted, especially during the pandemic, for whatever reason. I think people maybe are noticing it more, but also some of the other more public programs like NCDOT has a lot of litter collection. They've had struggles with staffing and resources. I think that has inhibited their ability to do litter collection. So really appreciate Preston and his group and other groups like them stepping up and helping fill that gap. It's a valuable resource for our community. Keep us clean and keep our water quality.
Just the support that you show and George has shown, like this organization specifically. I know you guys do a lot of high level things, a lot of engineering, but just know that litter should never be, all you gotta do is reach out and you have the support of the crowd.
Preston, where do you get most of your volunteers from?
Well, we post on Meetup, like I said, and they find us either on Meetup. We post our social media sites, Instagram, Facebook. Reddit brings in a lot of volunteers, word of mouth. We do a lot of hosted cleanups where we'll invite an organization, a company, or another nonprofit, and those employees or volunteers or whatever, in turn, turn into our volunteers. So it's just constantly increasing our database. I looked recently, we're in our year and a half, we just passed a year and a half. We've already got 3,100 volunteer hours. We've had almost 500 what we call unique volunteers, which means different people. And we're at about a 50% clip of those people coming back for a second, at least a second.
So that pretty much anybody's welcome that wants to come out.
Anybody.
And how do you handle minors? Do you have like waivers?
We have waivers for everyone. So if you ever attend a cleanup, you'll notice that for those 2 hours, I'm just a nervous wreck. Are you okay? Everybody's usually, I make sure that we pick safe spaces, but even still, just a nervous wreck.
I have two questions. One, have you worked with the city's Big Sweep program? And then the second, in your experience, are there areas of Raleigh that have a higher density of trash than other areas?
So, to answer your first question, Wayne, was that big sweep that I believe?
I don't think that was the specific big sweep.
Okay.
That was a citywide organized coordinated effort that the president and his group were a part of.
That we have, other than some communication on areas to clean up, we kind of stay out of the municipality. We just kind of keep our relationship as you guys let us know where you need us, and we're more than happy to go in that area. And as far as areas that need to be cleaned up more often, yes. When I first started this organization, I said we could be the New Hope Road cleanup and have a cleanup every week. Like, honestly, we could be the Southeast Raleigh cleanup and have a cleanup every week. And I actually have to force myself to get outside of those areas because I want us to be the Great Raleigh cleanup, to go to South Raleigh, West Raleigh, maybe areas where if we did a cleanup, we might not have to go back for 6 months. So I do kind of find that if we had to, we could stay in, Southeast Raleigh, South Raleigh, but we force ourselves to, even if it's a small cleanup, even if we go down to Western Boulevard and get 11 bags of trash, which to us is a small cleanup, we force ourselves to do that. Good.
Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I now invite Dr. Hammond. Okay, fantastic.
Good afternoon, esteemed commissioners. Thank you so much for having us today. So my name is Travis Mccullum. I work directly with the Department of Equity and Inclusion, and I serve as a staff liaison, much the same way that Wayne does to the Human Relations Commission, the Fair Housing Hearing Board. I'm just really going to provide some context on how we got to be here today. I'm really going to turn over to my colleagues. So in terms of the Human Relations Commission, one of the commissioners had questions around just kind of some of the flooding that was occurring in South Raleigh, and we realized what a great resource we had in Wayne and his team with stormwater, and also Megan Anderson in sustainability. So what ended up happening was ultimately Wayne was able to present some information to that individual commissioner, but then eventually he was able to last month come to our Human Relations Commission meeting, where he really provided an extensive look at some of the work that Stormwater is doing in terms of keeping an equitable lens in the work that they're doing. So please just kind of keep that in mind. But really, what we're doing here today is doing much of the same. How Wayne shared what Stormwater is doing and the work that they're doing. The City of Raleigh's Department of Equity and Inclusion works closely with multiple departments, and Stormwater is no exception. So whether it's work around different watersheds and looking at watershed studies, things of that nature, we are certainly partnering with Stormwater, and we're working with them closely regarding equitable engagement and prioritization of projects, things of that nature. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Sarah Pritchard, and I'm going to let her share a little bit with you, Sarah.
Thank you, Travis. Hello, Commissioners. My name is Sarah Hertrick. I am the Executive Management Coordinator for the Department of Equity and Inclusion. I am here because I'm personally interested, particularly in stormwater, green infrastructure, as well as environmental justice. I did participate in the Walnut Creek Watershed Learning Network, I think fall 2021. I also live in a flood zone, so it is kind of a personal interest for me, as well as I'm here to kind of look for those partnership opportunities that we can have, reaching out for marginalized communities in the Raleigh area. And with that, turn it over to my director, Dr. Hamilton.
Thank you, Travis and Sarah. Thank you so much for inviting me. I really wanted to take the time to meet with you today to talk about the work that I'm doing as the Director of Equity Inclusion for the City of Raleigh. Just to give you a little context about my background, it's a little bit different. I'm a geographer. I know a lot of people think of geography, it's like maps, GPS, not that type of geographer. What I'm really concerned about is cultivating spaces of belonging and really thinking about what it means to live in this ecosystem that we live in. I think we live in a really beautiful, amazing city and state, but sometimes people take it for granted. And so one of the things I want you to think about is how this work connects into equity and inclusion. For me, equity and inclusion, it's not just one thing. It's about race, gender, sexuality, social class, et cetera, but it's also about access, right? It's also about environmental justice. And so the work that we'll be doing within the department in the next couple of years is really expanding what that means. I think some of the comments that Sarah made about some of the neighborhoods, we know these things exist not only in the city of Raleigh, but other cities as well. And so we really want to broaden and open that conversation because again, at the end of the day, when we think about creating a space of belonging, it's not just the buildings, it's nature. We should be really, really grateful. I just moved here from Boston, and like every time I wake up every day, I'm like, wow, this is beautiful. Although I'm sure by August, I'll be like, wow, I'm extremely tired of the humidity, but really happy to come here today. And I look forward to visiting again. And we, as Sarah mentioned before, we also plan to create some type of outreach and build partnerships. And I just want to see, do we have any questions?
I mean, this topic is one that's very close to me because I lead a congregation that is, the church actually is in the flood plain, and there is flooding that happens quite a bit at Rochester Heights. The document, the pre-meeting material, this comes from?
Yes, the pre-meeting material was the equity framework that the Stormwater Division had contracted with a consultant, part of the watershed study that we are doing, and that we're planning to use that from an equitable engagement as part of our watershed planning standpoint. Travis was kind enough to review it and said it's been developed over the last 6 months, so we did get some input from the equity inclusion department on that. But we'll continue working with them as we implement those recommendations as well as other recommendations that we get from our consultants and from equity inclusion.
And we'll definitely be involved in the conversation. Again, as I mentioned, a lot of my work specifically deals with underrepresented, underserved neighborhoods. And so when I think about just the environmental violence and again, certain neighborhoods being in certain areas, it's a huge impact.
Just make sure I'm clear. Dr. Hamilton, your group did not author this.
No, we did not, no.
But you reviewed it.
Yes.
Yes. I reviewed it and I provided comments and consultations and some work team regarding that.
Okay, all right.
When did your market start at the city?
When did we start? And let me just context, I am in my third month here. I started January the 31st. So fairly new, which is why I have my meeting stack here with me.
So the department actually was created as a department formally. It's about a year old, this department. However, the history of the Department of Equity and Inclusion, it really evolved as the Office of Human Relations out of our Housing and Neighborhoods Department. Then it became its own office as the Office of Equity and Inclusion, and then within a matter of months turned into the Department of Equity and Inclusion. So we're looking at realistically probably about a 2-year time frame that all of this change has occurred. So we are a relatively new department, anywhere between 24 to 30 months old.
And I will say a large amount of work that I understand, a lot of it was connected to working in Word doing training. And so my scope is working with the community and actually being out, which is why I have my staff here. It's easy for us to have conversations through email, but we actually want to know what's going on. So a large part of the work will be actually coming to the communities and see what's happening, in addition to working with consultants, commissions, boards, and community partners.
I don't have a question, just more of a comment. I love that we have this department, and I think it'd be nice to have this department work with some of the other departments, because we really can't have neighborhood improvements like without, well, it's usually when we do like green infrastructure improvements, gentrification becomes waste. And
Yes.
so how do we have those conversations where everybody is included and the community is included and people aren't pushed out of? It's just a discussion that we need.
Definitely.
Yeah, I was thinking back to I used to serve on the EAP and the sustainability office, like 3 or 4 people, and it just becomes this thing where they need to touch everything in the city. The city wants to be things that should be, and you guys should be touching everything in the city.
Yes.
The city is who it thinks it is, yet you're probably going to be a very small apartment for a while, and it just is going to be a challenge to serve the city well.
Well, I will say one of the things that I'm looking at is partnering with sustainability, community engagement, strategy, and innovation, and also, as I say, unlikely partners. I come from a university environment, and we worked in a silo, but we can't work in a silo. This work is so important, and so for me, it's bringing those people inside as well to actually do the work. And we do have a small department, but we also have very passionate people. And actually, I think I found out maybe 3 weeks ago that Sarah was interested in this. So this is part of those conversations, right? Because sometimes we're doing work, but what are we addressing? And so my lens began to shift as I was talking to Sarah.
Your comment about cultivating spaces of belonging captivated me. And I'm wondering, this is not stormwater specific, but do you have an opinion on the city's efforts around crime prevention through environmental design?
So again, as I mentioned, I'm in my 3rd month of employment. I'm still looking at that. I think right now we have to look at it from an equity lens. So when we talk about environmental design, who is building that and who are we keeping out, right? And also how are we looking at the citizens? It's interesting. As I was reviewing the strategic plan, I also began to look at other cities. They have what is called defensive architecture. I don't know if anyone's heard of that before. So there's ways in which sometimes the city that we create these barriers and impediments, but I'm still investigating, but I can say that we also will be part of that conversation, hopefully, because all those things are connected. And I love the comment that you said that we should be involved in every piece because we have to be involved in it. Again, the work is not just for the city, it's for every district in the city.
How would you, just trying to think, moving forward, how is there a liaison in your department that Wayne would be working with on land use, stormwater issues, whatever? Yeah, are you kind of set your group up that way, like, or, I mean, I'm just trying to figure out how do you benefit from having this department in a day-to-day basis? Is there a person you're going to, is that Really started.
Yeah.
That's you right now.
Yes, correct. So I can speak to that a little bit. This idea of where small wood might be sitting, right? In that we have slowly evolved to 10 employees. That's including our executive director over the course of these 2 years. But with that said, under the leadership of our former director, the approach that was taken was everyone in the department was assigned the individual departments that they would work with. And for me, I had the great honor of being assigned stormwater, working in stormwater. So what my role becomes is almost like a consultant that's operating internally in terms of reviewing documentation, providing suggestions around equity. However, as Dr. Henderson so articulated earlier, so much of our focus up until this point has been this internal engagement, right? There's been a lot of training and working with city employees, and that was important to build capacity. However, this new lens that we're approaching the work with is really focusing on communities and getting in communities to find out, what the needs of the community are, where there's disparities manifesting themselves, where can we break down the systemic inequities that we see in our community. So in turn, really, that's why I said some of the work that we'll be doing with Wayne is around, just kind of equitable engagement and engaging the community. So that's the next step that I see us taking in partner with Stormwater and many other departments.
And then also, I'm just this idea of participatory action research, that we're not only here to have a conversation with you, but to help guide the process and help you find partners. And I would say another thing that we plan to do is actually get out in the city. It may seem really weird, but what does it mean when you talk about these areas, to actually go to those areas and talk to people in those areas? And that's an overarching project. It's not just about stormwater, but just other issues. Because for me, again, being a new resident, right now, Raleigh is a map. But for me, I need to get out and see what is happening with my own eyes, along with my team as well.
Let me just follow up on the Graham's point too. From stormwater perspective, I'm looking at it from a, kind of the user standpoint. They are our guides in terms of how we implement the work that we're doing. So, as we're developing more policies and programs, we can bounce it off of them. They help inform our approaches to make sure they're equitable, give us guidance in terms of inclusionary practices. Engagement's going to be a big one, has been a big one, will continue to be a big one. And I'll talk a little bit more that that's part of some of the things that we're doing. So I think that we can help leverage them because we're the ones doing the work. We just need their guidance in terms of how to implement it in the right way. And they don't have to always be involved in everything we're doing, but we'll touch base with them and key milestones to make sure that we're taking the right steps and using the right approaches. This is going to be an evolutionary process, right? This framework was first step to give us some things we need to work on, but it's going to be a work in progress as well.
Wayne, what you just described is kind of forward-looking. You go to them when there's a new programming plan. Is there any plans to do backwards looking at historical programs? I'm thinking rainwater rewards is one where I could see there being not equitable disbursement. Is there a plan to go back and look at current programs through that lens?
Yes, there is. In fact, and I've got some stuff in my presentation. A couple of things there. Drainage, the DA program. In 2017, that was revised with a pretty major change. That used to be a cost share program where the city paid for a portion of the project, but there still had to be a share by the customer. And that really limited who could afford, even if it was 80-20 and the customer share was $1,000 or $2,000, that's a very limiting barrier to many people that could not participate. So that changed in 2017, made the city share 100%. So that I think has really opened it up in a more equitable way. So that's one example. This summer, one of the climate action plan interns that the city has gotten some money to fund. One of those interns is working for us, Scott Bryant. I don't know if Scott's here today, but he's the guy, the mentor for the intern. And the assignment we're going to give that intern is to go back to 2004 when we started our utility and look at all the stormwater projects that we funded, look at that funding levels and where that funding was put in the community and overlay that on some of these indices that we're looking at and trying to get a feel for how it's been distributed, what the barriers were. You know, if there are some communities we are not doing work and why and how we can change that. So very much a backward looking, you know, get a context of how we've done in the past, to look at how we can do it better in the future.
I'm glad to hear you focused on communication. So I think a lot of inequities are because people don't have access to communication. Not knowing what services the city, not knowing how to work with the city. So I think that communication both ways will be a big step forward.
Yes, and one of the other areas that I'm developing is called narrative. So how do we change the narrative? And so I have a team member that will be working on different types of communication. We know there are generational differences, right? Everyone doesn't want to read a 40-page briefing. So how can we use social media and other forms of communication to get messages out to our residents? So that'll be part of that as well.
Do you have any nuggets for us as a commission, how to keep an equitable lens?
I think to set in the discomfort, you need to set in the discomfort.
To sit in the discomfort.
Yeah, to sit in the discomfort. I think it's easy to be very passionate about these issues, but it takes time to solve it. But also you have to sit in discomfort that change, it takes time to make change, right? Some of the things you mentioned before, historically, it's occurred for a while. Even if we go back to some of these neighborhoods, floodplain, just my experience as a geographer, I mean, this goes back to really zoning laws in the 1910s, 1915, 1920. You have people talking about the same thing. If we look at some of the areas, historically, they were marginalized. So sitting in discomfort that that thing happened, but we can still make changes, but it will take time. And I just want to thank you again for inviting me, and I'm always available as a resource, as is my staff.
Just got one more question. Sounds like you come up north, so the Bruins are going to bounce back.
I'm actually from Kentucky. I just moved around a lot, but and I'm not a sports fan, so I have no idea. But thank you so much.
Thank you all very much for coming. We really do appreciate it. With that context, I'd like to give a very high level overview, and we've got about maybe 15 minutes left before our tour, which I don't want to take time away from that. Oh, thank you very much, Matt. So I wanted to give a high level overview of some of the things that we are doing and looking forward to doing. I'm going to go very quickly through these. So stop me if you do have questions, but a few of the things I want to talk about where we've been and some changes we've already made, as well as some things that we're looking forward. Obviously, this commission is our guide. One of the things that I'm proud of is in 2019, we went back and amended the ordinance that creates this commission to specifically put guidance to city council in their appointments to recognize the importance of diversity on this commission. Now, I believe I was told we were the first ones that did that in the city, recognizing this commission, the better it can reflect our community, the better guide it can give in terms of the level of service and the priorities and how we implement our programs. Our vision specifically mentions equity in achieving our mission. We want to be the smartest stormwater possible to economically and equitably achieve our mission. So this is something that we need to stay focused on continuously in order to serve our community in all the things that we do, which you're starting to get an appreciation for the many areas of our program. So level of service needs of the community. We've mentioned the framework, the equity framework for our watershed plan. That was the document that was included in the backup materials. And the important goal here is to represent the diverse perspectives of the communities of our program. So one of the changes that we're making as part of our watershed studies, as we are surveying the community, we're going to be collecting demographic data, comparing that to the demographics of the watershed to try to demonstrate whether or not we're getting a representative feedback from the community that's in that watershed as part of those survey results. So that's going to be important data that we will continue to collect. Innovative programs. So Mr. Moore mentioned, where we have been. So here's dots of the drainage assistance program, and they're fairly scattered, but it's only been since 2017 that we've changed that program that it's 100% coverage. So before that, I think there really was limiting in terms of who and where in the community they could take advantage of that program. So we are going to continue assembling that information, adding all of the CIP going back to 2004, which is really the majority of our CIP, because when we had our stormwater utility, when we started doing more and more projects. But that'll be something that we'll definitely come back and share with the commission once that intern project is complete. We are looking at a number of equity-related indices and data that we can use to guide. And this is just a broad research. There's probably more out there. We've been working with Department of Equity and Inclusion to look at some of the information, but we're plotting our watershed studies and some of the projects we have coming up on top of this data to see how it connects. And I'm going to go through a number of these very quickly, but just to give you an idea. So these are some of our watersheds. There's Hairside. This is Pigeon House. This is Walnut Creek, which we're starting to look at. But we want to make sure that we're including everyone, because watershed studies are an important tool for us to identify where CIP projects are needed. And if we just rely on complaints, as we have in the past to some degree, complaints are not an equitable way of getting information, because not everybody complains at the same rate based on their trust and so forth. So there's one from EPA, EJ Screening Index. I'm going to go through these very quickly, and we have not settled on any of these. These are just the range of types of information we're looking at. Here's one from the CDC, a social vulnerability index. It looks at socioeconomic index, minority status, housing type. Here's one also from CDC that looks at minority status and English language ability. Here's one from North Carolina DEQ related to potentially underserved communities. And, you can see the trends here. Everyone's a little different, but in general, South and Southeast Raleigh tend to have higher, although there's some portions of Northeast Raleigh that tend to have higher percentages based on a lot of these indices. Here's one from HUD, racially or ethnically concentrated areas. And here's one from White County, community of vulnerable population. So these are the types of information that we're looking at. We're still looking for how we can use this information and incorporate it into setting our priorities for capital improvement projects and other programs moving forward. Oh, there's one more, climate economic. This is from, I believe this was from the White House, actually, put this information out. So be good storage of data. The floodplain regulation changes that we just implemented and we're discussing that are going to be effective July 19th. Keeping additional development out of the floodplain, very important from an equity standpoint. Oftentimes the most vulnerable communities are in the most flood-prone areas. So we want to try to reduce that as much as possible and then continue to work with equitable voluntary buyouts to get vulnerable people that are living in the floodplain out of the floodplain and try to keep them safe. The challenge here is we've got affordable housing issues to deal with too. So very, very challenging things that we're dealing with here. Working with watershed community groups, mentioned the Walnut Creek Learning Network. That was an important group that we hope to continue partnering with PE groups to do these outreach programs so the community can become more educated and aware of stormwater and watershed related issues in general. This is an internal employee survey. I don't usually get into operational issues with this group, but I wanted to let you know that this is something we're looking at internally as well. We do an internal employee survey every year. This will be the 5th year. We're about to do it in May. And we ask our employees questions. And this was the first time that we added last year. So we're about to get a second year. I want to see how, we're going to look at the trends. So the questions are, the Stormwater Management Division considers equity and inclusion in how we hire our employees. And here's a range of answers. We've got some work to do because some people don't think we're doing a very good job. In general, though, we're in the above 60s, above average, but still a lot of work to do. We recognize we need to improve, and our goal is to make the trend improve over time. Here's one. Stormwater Management Division considers equity and inclusion how we treat and recognize employees. Okay, and this question is, Stormwater Management considers equity and inclusion and how we treat and serve our customers. And so this is the first time we did this. This is the baseline, and we have made improvements to try to address each of these related to succession planning, job career paths for non-technical staff, how we are advertising and recruiting to fill our positions. All of these types of things are things we're working on and will continue to work on because our staff also needs to reflect the community in order for us to best serve our community. Partnerships, we're working with parks. Here's some Silva cells, green stormwater infrastructure we put down in Chavis Park. So putting these types of stormwater devices into the community also helps us interact and engage with the community to have the conversations about the benefits of good stormwater practices. Making sure development is done in a safe, equitable, environmentally sound manner, making sure our regulations are in place and are enforced properly. And then lastly, engagement with community groups. You might recognize this fellow right here. Helps us spread the word and have the conversation with the community of the work that we're doing and engage the community in an equitable way. So when we work smart, we ensure we get diverse community input through SMAC, through other public outreach, because we really need to understand the needs of the community to implement equitable solutions, update our watershed planning to get better data and more diverse input from hopefully a diverse representation of the community, improve our flood hazard mitigation program I've mentioned, using GSI, leading by example, improving our design standards, and finally reaching the community through trusted, established leaders and groups to improve engagement, awareness, knowledge of our mission goals and objectives. Well, that's where I have this. Some ideas, again, very high level. I rushed through it, but wanted to give you a sense of the types of things that we're working on, we'll continue to work on, and we appreciate the partnership with Department of Equity and Inclusion. I'll make another mention of another new office in the city that we're working closely with is the Office of Community Engagement. And we are coordinating closely with that department or office, I guess, as well, to help to make sure that our outreach programs are done in an equitable manner as well. Be glad to take any questions.
Wayne, I'm grateful for your presentation. Is it possible for us to receive a copy of this?
Absolutely, yes, sir.
Just to point out one thing, I mean, went through a lot of slides. If you could go back to the, I think it was rainwater rewards, this is near the beginning. Yeah, keep going back. Yeah, right. Okay, so really is scattered, and we can see, because I see where St. Ambrose is, southeast, Rochester Heights, yep, that there, and you on the other side of 40. That's not as populated. So, that jumps out. And then if you overlay this, if you go forward a few slides, here you go. The Walnut Creek Watershed is important to me because I always think it looks like a car transmission, old school. And you see, again, I know exactly where Rochester Heights is. You see its color, keep flipping. Keep going through your slide.
There's the Hills Park right there.
Yep, so keep going, color, keep going, color, keep going, color, everyone's colored. And then I think about, what Preston said, the trash density, he said it could be on, Newburgh Avenue every day. So, these things are interrelated. And to see it plotted, which is why if you go to your last slide, I think the second point is crucial. I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. This watershed planning. What does an equity index or what do equity indices look like? Because, if we look at our model, if we don't have one now, but if we do, and taking Gerald's comment, not only forward looking, but backward looking, if we get that right, then it will turn those colored maps non-colored to be equitable, because I feel like oppression should be equitable. A certain type of people do not always need to be oppressed. And also it can help turn the scatter plots of where we've had projects, make it look more uniform, because there is a gap now.
Agreed, yes, sir. That's our goal, absolutely. And data will help inform us on how best to move forward.
The documentation, that data, it'll be interesting to see, you got CNP or drainage systems projects, RRP, you got other things, and then, there's a dollar amount too.
Yep.
Yeah, dots are dots, but that's, I think we know how it'll shake out, but I just, but it'd be interesting to see some of that stuff. Try to slice it several different ways.
No, it's a good point. We can, one thought we had was make the size of the dot bigger based on proportionate to the expenditure, right? A big project will be a bigger dot and smaller project. So it's not just how many dots in the locations, it's the resource investments as well.
What is your, this is where I'm going to do a few meetings as well. What is your recommendations first to watershed planning? Like, what, every so often, every so many years you're doing it? How do you approach watershed?
Yeah, so our goal is, it's been on a rotational basis. So the program started in around 1990, I believe, Mark and I were involved in the first one that was done then. And it's been rotational. So we've gone through and done watershed planning studies for pretty much the entire city. Okay, over the course of the last 30 years or so. And now we're getting ready to start over again. And we're working to improve that planning process this time around to have more engagement. But one of the things we've been looking at is how do we establish priorities for where we're going to start that watershed planning again. We've started a couple of them already. But we want to be intentional and have this be a part of our decision process for where we need to be setting these priorities. So let me go to, I guess I could pick any of them. Hairstock was the first one. We picked that one because we had 3 big projects on our CIP that we were about to move forward with that needed more comprehensive look because they were so interactive. They'd been planned kind of independently, but we needed to look at those. So that was, we said, we need to do something here because we're about to spend money here. Pigeon House Branch was the next one, and we've started doing work there. That was primarily driven by aging infrastructure. There's a lot of really, really old pipes that were starting to fail that we didn't know the condition of. So that was really the driver there. And this is where we're anticipating to go next, much for the same reason. There's a lot of aging infrastructure issues here, but we're also starting to get into some of the areas in Southeast Raleigh as well. This is the Rocky Branch, and these are some of the watersheds into Walnut Creek. But we definitely want to look at expanding, in these areas as well with our watershed planning. And the rate that we can do these watershed plans is all about priorities and budgets. And we could take more of our resources and shift it into the watershed planning, speed those up. I think we did some estimates. It'll probably cost around $20 to $30 million to do all of the watershed studies over again. So it's not an insignificant expenditure. I think we put about $1 million a year generally. So if we wanted to do it more quickly, we would have to expend more resources into those watershed studies. But that's the kind of guidance that the commission can give us is, do we want to accelerate those and maybe back off some of the implementation, to make better decisions or more equitable decisions? Those are all types of input that we welcome.
Keep educating me on that then and tell me what's the output of a watershed plan. You marked one, but I just, like, does it help? It sounds like Airline Creek, it helped you, give you some data to work on the 3 projects you've already identified. Does it identify 3 more projects in that area, or what's the value of what do you get out of it?
Yeah, so the output of a watershed study is a list of capital improvements projects that are prioritized to address the specific issues that were identified, whether they be flooding issues, perhaps they're water quality issues, perhaps they're stream restoration issues, aging infrastructure issues, all of those types of issues that drive our capital improvement expenditures. We look at comprehensively with community input and make decisions and priorities for where those fit into our capital improvements program. And it's, you know, we're not excluding the other projects that we already have identified through various means, past watershed studies, complaints, just known issues that we get called out for maintenance that, you know, are problems that we've identified. So we continue to update that CIP. And as we move around with our watershed studies, that's an amendment to how we're setting priorities and adding those, you know, kind of fitting them into the CIP. They don't all go to the top. They don't all go to the bottom. They fit in based on our priority scoring model. They fit into our CIP. Good question.
Yeah. Thank you, Wayne.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Is there any other business?
I just want to say before we go off, I want to thank you, Reverend Taylor, and Wayne, and other people, because I've been on this for a long time. We recognized over along some equity issues, you know, we had that map showing in the box. And I remember back 25 years ago looking at Walnut Creek and doing some socioeconomic considerations back then. You can see all the money gets spent in Northern Raleigh. And over a lot of projects down South Raleigh. We had to start rethinking our CIP process. But, you know, my focus, and I think the stormwater focus is pretty narrow. We're looking at fixing problems. The whole environmental justice and socioeconomic issues come in. And I think it's great that we're doing this now. I'm excited about this. I think this is going to be great to add in stuff. It's just going to be such a challenge to how to use that prioritization and make it all work together. And like I said, backtrack and look at the problems we created before. You know, the areas that are economically challenged, the people are moving in areas that, you know, the flood areas, the nice waters down in New Orleans kind of situations we have, and how we fix that, or how do we not make that into the worst kind of situation. But I just think it's a great thing that Bruce is doing, that Stormwater was doing, because it's been a long time coming, and we really weren't paying attention to this way we should.
Thanks for your comments, Mark. And I think about what Dr. Hamilton said, segment of discomfort. And I think for stormwater to properly wade in the water, we just need to spend time there and go slow. Just canoe the noose. So maybe we should leave it.
You can see the differences there too. Who's living where? You see the nice expensive houses up on the high bluffs, and you see the other people living down in floodplain. Small houses.
Any other comments on Wayne or what we've been talking about? Is there any new business or other business? I should say, not new. All right, then they have a motion to adjourn.
So
Second. Okay. All in favor? Any opposition? No. Okay, so we're going to take a photo outside inside.